Thursday, and on Thursdays we always go to Wyoming Liberty Group to find out the latest, and this is the time of year when we take a look. He said index because we're taking a look at our freedom index. Now, if you are living in another state, and Charlie, I always do this every year with you, it's important to take a look at a state and rate for people who are listening to us in South Dakota, Nebraska, places like that, right now, Montana. Use this to compare to your state as well, because I think the index is pretty good. So, okay, let me start with a big basic question for you. More or less free, more or less liberty?
I think we're better off.
Okay.
And I'll give you, following on that, I'll give you what I think is the best news out of this year's Wyoming Liberty Index.
All right.
You know, every year I pick 12, or I don't pick them, the index picks them,
right.
But I mentioned the top 12 in the House and in the Senate. Well, this year's top 12 in the House has 6 freshmen in it.
Right.
And I find that very encouraging.
Okay, now if we're going to give us a Liberty Index, we have to, of course, say based on what? Because some people might argue with you, well, you know, the EPA is coming after us and all these other things. So what's your criteria?
Okay, here's the way it works. We're always looking for volunteers. We have volunteers look at each bill and rate it for the impact on liberty. Something that's a tax increase would probably get a low ranking, and that might be a -3 or -2 or something. Right. Something that's very good, like a pro-gun bill, we'd give a positive ranking to. And then I run that through some software and produce a spreadsheet. And then the spreadsheet has how each representative and senator voted on all the bills, and therefore it ranks them according to how they vote, you know, our opinion of the bills.
Okay. Now, do you also rate the governor in this?
No, we don't.
Okay.
I've been trying to think about how to do that, but one of the problems is it's a comparative thing. I can tell you that Senator so-and-so votes more pro-liberty than some other senator. It doesn't really travel even from the House to the Senate or vice versa. So the question is, how do I compare the governor? To whom do we compare the governor?
Right. And so in that sense, you probably couldn't compare decisions made by the courts in this formula.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That would be a completely different animal. In fact, I know in some states there are people who do look at judicial decisions and rate the judges.
Okay. All right. So let's go back now. House and Senate is what you're taking a look at, correct? In the state of Wyoming. Okay. So now when you take a look at the House and Senate, are things better off after our last election? Is that something that swung us into what you think is a better position?
I think so.
Okay.
Particularly in the House. Like I said, we've got 6 freshmen in the top 12 in the House. And I'm really pleased with that.
Right. Okay. Now, what pleases you about that?
Because we've got 6 people there who have started out very strong, very pro-liberty, and I expect most of them to be there for a while.
Okay. Where did these people come from? I mean, are they people that came from over in Jackson Hole or the more eastern side of the state? Where are you finding more liberty-oriented people?
Oh, boy. Yeah. All over the state. Okay. I mean, we've got Campbell County is very well represented in that, Natrona County. But we've also got, I mean, talk about the west side of the state. We've got Lincoln County where you can see Utah from your front porch.
Right.
And so it's all over.
Okay. Good. No, that's good to know. Okay. Because, sometimes there's a bit of an argument in the state of Wyoming is, let's say, Jackson Hole getting more liberal every single day. And I still think we should have collapsed the mountain passes between Jackson Hole and, let's say, California and Oregon a long time ago. And we probably could have saved Jackson Hole from becoming the socialist state that it's become. What about places like down in Cheyenne? Because I often hear the complaint that the least liberty-oriented town, it's a toss-up between Jackson Hole and Cheyenne, Wyoming.
I wonder if some of that about Cheyenne is just because that's where the state capital is.
Right.
But Laramie County gave us Harlan Edmonds, who did very well this year. And his wife, Amy Edmonds, has held that seat. She's done very well in the past.
Okay.
So, and as far as Jackson is concerned, I want to point out that one of the top 6 in the Senate is Senator Leland Christensen, who is from Teton County.
Okay. I'm talking with Charles Collier. He's from Wyoming Liberty Group, where every year we do a Liberty Index to find out how we're doing. So he seems pretty optimistic so far. So, okay, optimism, first off, in the kind of people and how they're voting. Do you look, and you did name some of the things like gun rights and so on, but do you have a list of things you specifically look at every single time for this index?
Well, I do not. I try to look at every single bill. I work for Republic Free Choice, which is a 501c4 nonprofit. And so I have the luxury and have the time to look at every single bill. Right. But I know that there are people who do look for specific things. Somebody who, for example, might be very knowledgeable on education, I would encourage that person to look at education-related bills.
Okay. Well, and let's qualify just a little bit more here. So what says that a bill is more liberty-oriented or a bill is less liberty-oriented? You've got to have some criteria in that. Is it the individual's ability to make their own choice? Does it do with spending? What's the criteria?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. It's the individual's ability to make their own choice, to contract with other individuals without some third party coming down on them, like the government.
Right.
And out of that comes a lot of things. Part of choice is, like I said, the ability to contract with other people. So a bill that would favor free enterprise is something that I would look at. Taxes are a problem because, of course, you take money away from people, they have less money to spend on the things that they want, and the government spending it probably on things they don't want.
Right. And I would guess weighing heavily into that would have to be property rights.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's key. How can you contract with another individual to trade something for something else if you don't own the something?
Okay. So, and when I say property, of course, first thing I think of is, somebody's home, and the property that they live on. But property rights could also be a business, could also be their vehicle. There's so many other things that could fall under property. So they should be able to decide who they're going to contract and do business with very little interference or regulation from the government, unless there's a problem. That's what the courts are for. Right.
And the courts should be there. Some kind of court system should be there to adjudicate problems. And one of the really nice things about the court system is they're not supposed to be dealing with broad issues. I sue you for breach of contract. The only question that the court should look at is, did Glenn breach his contract?
Right.
Not, we don't care if Glenn breached his contract or not, but we know that we'll get some great social good if we slam Glenn with a huge fine, and so we're going to do that.
Right.
No, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Okay. So as we take a look at the Liberty Index for anywhere, any state, and I also got to include, because you're looking at states here, but counties, cities, also have to think about just in general, the size of government, because the bigger it gets, the less liberty we have, right? So if we have a projected $200 million that we have to cut, do you see Wyoming government with these new people that seem to have you, interested anyway in watching them? Are they going to shrink the size of government? And if they did, would that make us more free?
I think so.
Okay.
The problem with big government is the bigger it is, the more it can boss people around, and therefore you're less free. And also, the bigger it is, the more it deprives you of your own property, and therefore your own right to dispose of that as you see fit.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would also think, and I don't know if you include this in, but maybe next time I'm going to lobby you to include this in, the more power that your legislative body gives to the bureaucracy, because one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is when they write a law and then they turn to the bureaucracy and say, okay, you write the rules to make this happen. You figure out how we're going to get it done. Well, you just gave the bureaucracy lawmaking authority. And if you remember a few years ago, state of Wyoming, we almost lost our farmers markets because of that. Because they just started writing rules that would have, and Representative Sue Wallace is the one who came in and helped put a stop to that. I mean, and of course, being a farmer herself, she was tip of the spear on that one. So do you ever take a look at how much power they give to the bureaucracy?
That's one of the things that I'll look at on a bill. How much rulemaking do we have here? I have heard that there will be a bill out of the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee this year to let the Fish and Game Commission set the fees for your hunting license. Now, considering that they came, I think it was 2 years ago, with 4 bills to increase license fees rather, 3 of those died in the TRW committee, and the 4th failed on the floor of the House. That should tell you that there's a discrepancy between what the commission wants to do and what the legislature wants. And that's a prime example of moving decision-making down to the bureaucracy. And that's something that I don't think should be there.
Okay.
The other side of that, though, is if you're going to tell people, go do something, you shouldn't micromanage them.
Yeah.
And this legislature is very good at micromanaging. So there's a balance there.
Okay. All right. Well, and speaking of telling, as soon as you said that, it made me think of, this is my definition of a law, and I don't care if the bureaucrats wrote it or the politicians wrote it. If I'm caught doing it and I'm punished, or if I have to do it or else, it's a law. In one way or the other, it's ordering me around. And so I take a look at citizens in the state of Wyoming, and I wonder about how much we're told to do and how much we're told that we can't do. And I wonder, is that kind of intrusion into our lives, into our decision making?
That's a difficult call. If I had to, though, I'd say less. I think the Food Freedom Bill was a great step in that direction.
Yeah.
And
I got to tell you this real quick. I used to get a call. He still calls now and then on other issues. But there was a guy who called me under the name of the Milk Bootlegger. Yeah. And quite literally, he would go to South Dakota and get milk and bring it back into the state of Wyoming in the trunk of his car. Just kind of sneak it back over the border. And as soon as the Food Freedom Act was passed, he's like, well, I guess I don't have to do that anymore. I can just go buy milk from my neighbor now. So I was actually getting a call from a bootlegger on this program. I was proud every time I took that call.
I think great, good for him. And I say this, this guy is a milk legger, which is great. Mm-hmm. And I speak as a former gold smuggler.
Really?
Yeah.
We're going to have to talk about that at some point. That's an interesting conversation you and I have. Cheyenne, Wyoming today, Charles?
Actually, today I'm way over on the west side of the state. I'm in Lincoln County.
Okay. And he's with Wyoming Liberty Group and now doing a index, which he does every single year, Liberty Index. So I was wondering, it doesn't sound like you're looking at this, you're looking at, the state legislature, but, House and Senate. But I look at this and I wonder, do you ever stop and consider how free we are because of intrusion on the House and Senate? In other words, intrusion from the EPA or just the federal government in general and what they have to deal with?
Oh, yeah. I think the largest source of our problems in terms of freedom and other problems is the federal government.
Right.
And you mentioned the EPA. Wait until you start reading about their clean power rules. That's going to be very expensive. And the EPA themselves admit that their alleged excuse for this to reduce carbon isn't going to affect temperatures by any measurable amount. So,
well, yeah, and not to get off on a different subject over there, but I get a kick out of the governor wanting to do something with either carbon sequestration or pay for for companies to come up with innovative things to do with CO2. And my answer to that was, well, they already are. You ever shoot like a pellet gun? When you drink a soda, that's CO2 in there, which, by the way, comes from power plants and factories. That's where they capture it to put it in there. Companies are already doing this kind of stuff. But Wyoming wouldn't be looking into ideas like this if they didn't feel pressure from the federal government.
So, yeah, we get a lot of pressure from Washington. The feds have figured out that they've got this huge deficit. They can reduce some of their spending by saying, all right, we're going to produce this really horrible rule. But if the states will do it, we won't be quite so onerous, but the states end up paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
So the feds get what they want in return for the state of Wyoming picks it up. So
and this is what I'm getting at here is that from our governor to our state legislators, at times they seem to pick up a certain policy or write a bill because we need to do this to keep the feds off of our back. Normally we would never go this route, but in order to keep the federal government off our back, we better pass the following into law. That's
yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. To quote John Barrasso, all federal money is either bribes or blackmail.
Yeah.
The feds come to the state and say, we'll give you money to do X. And regardless of, I've watched this time after time after time, regardless of whether the state or the county or the town actually needs to do X, as soon as you say there's federal money, we can get a grant to do this, boom, it's done.
Yeah.
Do we really need bike trails all over the state of Wyoming? I don't know, but there's federal money for them, so we're going to do them.
Yeah, just go ahead and waive the money, and they don't seem to understand that the money at some point disappears. So it's really, you're talking about bait and switch. I mean, it is really baiting people with money, if you think about it. And then at some point, the money dries up, and it's all just on us. So, okay, people should take a look at this Liberty Index that you write up every single year. And do you break it down into categories like education, things like that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
where do they find this at? Because I know it's an interesting read. Where do they find it at?
They would find it at WyomingLibertyIndex.info.
Okay.
And while you're there, anybody who wants to volunteer, I'm always looking for volunteers.
Yeah. So, okay. Wyoming, say that address again.
WyomingLibertyIndex.info.
Okay. As always, thanks for coming on the program. We'll do it again, same time and date next year.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.